What happens when a simple day at the park turns into a nightmare of injustice? A black man, quietly minding his own business, suddenly finds himself targeted by a power-hungry cop. With no reason, no crime, and no respect, he's humiliated in front of a crowd of shocked bystanders. But what the officer doesn't know is that this man isn't just anyone. He holds a secret that will turn the tables, expose the truth, and leave the entire station in shock. Stay with me, because you won't believe how this story ends. It was a calm afternoon in the city park, the kind of day where the air carried just enough warmth to invite people outside. Children laughed on the playground. Couples strolled lazily along the walking paths, and the sound of a street performer's saxophone floated through the breeze. Among the scattered crowd sat Marcus Johnson, a tall, composed black man in his mid-30s. He had taken the day off after a grueling week at work, needing a few hours of peace to clear his mind. In his hand was a simple book of poetry, something he always turned to when he wanted to think deeply without the noise of the world. Marcus didn't stand out, at least not intentionally. He wore casual clothes, dark jeans, a fitted polo, and clean sneakers. Beside him sat a bottle of water and his phone, which buzzed occasionally with messages he ignored. He had chosen a park bench near the fountain where he could watch the rhythm of the city without having to participate in it. To anyone watching, he looked like a man enjoying his weekend. But to Marcus, this was more than leisure. It was a reminder of how important it was to stay grounded. His job demanded constant vigilance, and when he got a moment to breathe, he cherished it. But not everyone saw Marcus that way. Officer Daniels, a white police officer in his late 40s, patrolled the park that afternoon. Known among his colleagues for being short-tempered and overly suspicious, Daniels carried himself with the confidence of someone who thought his badge made him untouchable. He had already scolded a group of teenagers for skateboarding and stared down a young couple for sitting too close on a park bench. Authority wasn't just part of his job, it was his identity. When Daniel's eyes fell on Marcus, something in him hardened. Marcus wasn't doing anything suspicious. He was simply reading. But to Daniels, the sight of a black man sitting calmly in a mostly white park triggered a wave of judgment he didn't bother to hide. Instead of seeing a man enjoying his afternoon, Daniels saw a threat, a suspicious figure, someone who didn't fit. He adjusted his belt, squared his shoulders, and approached. "Hey, you," he barked, loud enough for heads to turn. Marcus looked up slowly, calm and unshaken. He had encountered men like this before, men who mistook arrogance for authority. He closed his book gently, placed it on his lap, and raised his eyes to meet the officer's. "Yes, officer? Can I help you?" His tone was respectful, steady, but not submissive. Daniels narrowed his eyes. "What are you doing here?" Marcus tilted his head slightly. "I'm sitting, reading. Same thing anyone else is doing in a park." "That's not what I asked." Daniels shot back. "Do you have ID on you?" Marcus studied the man for a moment, taking in the hostility beneath his words. He knew this wasn't about a park bench or an ID. It was about perception. Daniels had already decided Marcus didn't belong here. "Why do you need to see my ID?" Marcus asked evenly. Daniels stepped closer, his hand hovering near his holster, not quite touching, but close enough to send a message. "Because I asked for it. That's reason enough. Unless you've got something to hide." Around them, the energy shifted. Parents pulled their children a little closer, not wanting them near the confrontation. Joggers slowed, pretending to tie their shoes while sneaking glances. The street performer stopped playing mid-song, the music dying in the air. All eyes turned toward the park bench, where Marcus sat, suddenly the center of attention for a crime he hadn't committed. Marcus exhaled slowly, steadying himself. His instinct was to reach for his wallet, pull out the badge that would silence this nonsense in an instant. But something inside him told him to wait. to watch, to let this man reveal himself. Marcus knew the power of patience, and right now, Daniels was exposing himself more with every word. "I don't need to show you anything unless you have probable cause," Marcus replied calmly. His words were careful, chosen like a man who had studied both law and human behavior. Daniels smirked, the kind of smirk that said he enjoyed the tension. Probable cause? Big words for someone sitting on a park bench. Maybe you've been casing the area, looking for trouble. Maybe you're loitering. That's reason enough. "That's not reason," Marcus said softly, his voice even but his eyes sharp. "That's assumption." The crowd grew thicker, whispers rippling through the park. Some muttered in support of Marcus. Others kept their distance, afraid to interfere. But the energy was undeniable. People were watching, and Daniels was digging himself into a hole he didn't yet realize. Finally, Daniels snapped. "Stand up. Hands where I can see them. You're under arrest for failure to comply with a lawful order." Gasps shot through the crowd. Marcus rose slowly, every movement controlled, deliberate. He didn't resist, didn't argue, but the disappointment in his eyes burned hotter than any anger. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly, his voice carrying farther than he expected. Daniels pulled out the cuffs, the metallic click echoing louder than the fountain nearby. He grabbed Marcus's wrist, roughly, twisting it behind his back. "We'll see about that," he sneered. "You think you're smart? You're just another thug who doesn't know his place." The words cut through the air like glass. Several people in the crowd pulled out their phones, recording now. Daniels didn't notice. He was too focused on asserting his authority. But Marcus noticed, and though his wrists were bound, his dignity was not. He knew this wasn't the end of the story. In fact, it was only the beginning, because Officer Daniels had no idea who he had just handcuffed. Behind his calm eyes, Marcus knew the moment of truth was coming. And when it arrived, this officer's arrogance would collapse under the weight of reality. For Marcus wasn't just another man sitting in the park. He was an FBI agent, and the badge Daniels thought he could ignore would soon teach him a lesson he would never forget. The metallic click of the handcuffs had silenced the park. Conversations that once filled the air now hung frozen on people's lips. Parents pulled their children close, eyes darting nervously between the officer and the man being arrested. Phones tilted upward, their cameras recording every second of the scene. The once peaceful park now pulsed with unease. Marcus, his wrists locked behind him, did not resist. His movements were precise, controlled, almost deliberate in their calmness. He wasn't the type to thrash or shout, though he had every reason to. Instead, he stood tall, his shoulders square, his eyes fixed firmly ahead. His silence was louder than a scream, a kind of dignity that unsettled those watching. Officer Daniels, however, mistook that silence for defiance. To him, Marcus's composure was arrogance, a refusal to acknowledge his authority. Daniels yanked the cuffs tighter, enough to sting Marcus's wrists, and sneered. "You think you're better than me? You'll learn fast." Marcus's lips pressed together in a faint line. He didn't flinch. He didn't give Daniels the satisfaction of pain. Instead, he spoke, his voice even and low, but sharp enough to cut through the murmurs of the crowd. "You're overstepping, officer. You've already gone too far." Daniels chuckled, shaking his head as he forced Marcus toward the patrol car parked along the curb. "Too far? This is me being nice. People like you don't belong here, lounging around in the park like you own it. I keep the streets safe. That means keeping an eye on people like you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even those who had stayed silent shifted uncomfortably at his words. A woman's voice rose from the back. "He wasn't doing anything," she shouted. Daniels turned his head sharply. "Stay out of it," he barked, but the damage was done. More people began to murmur, their phones raised higher, recording every angle. A jogger whispered to his friend, "That man didn't resist once. Why is he treating him like that?" Marcus knew what was happening. Daniels was digging deeper, blind to the fact that the world was watching. He didn't need to fight back. The officer's arrogance was doing the work for him. Every word, every action was being documented. And soon, the truth would come crashing down. As they reached the patrol car, Daniels shoved Marcus against the hood, pressing down on his shoulder with unnecessary force. The steel of the car burned hot under the afternoon sun, but Marcus's eyes stayed steady, his voice calm. "You're making a mistake, officer." Daniels smirked. "The only mistake was you thinking you could sit here like you belonged. Now you're going to jail. Maybe then you'll learn some respect." Respect. The word stung, not for Marcus, but for the people watching. Respect was something Daniels demanded but never gave. It was written in his tone, in the way he treated Marcus like less than human. A young man from the crowd finally stepped forward. "Officer, he wasn't doing anything wrong. You can't just arrest someone for sitting in the park." Daniels spun around, his hand hovering near his holster again. "You want to join him? Keep your mouth shut, unless you want cuffs too." The crowd recoiled, but their phones stayed steady. Fear mixed with determination. No one wanted to get too close, but no one was leaving either. They all knew something was wrong. Marcus let out a slow breath, his patience unbroken. He could end this right now. One sentence, one flash of the badge hidden in his wallet, and Daniels would crumble. But Marcus understood the importance of timing. To reveal himself too soon would make this just another altercation brushed under the rug. No, he thought. The lesson had to be bigger. It had to be public. Daniels reached for the door handle of the patrol car when another officer arrived. Officer Ruiz, younger, Hispanic, and far less hardened, stepped out of his car with wide eyes at the scene unfolding. He had been called as backup, but hadn't expected this. One officer with a black man in cuffs, surrounded by a crowd that looked more outraged by the second. "What's going on here?" Ruiz asked carefully, his gaze moving between Daniels, Marcus, and the crowd recording on their phones. Daniels scoffed. Suspicious individual, loitering, refused to provide ID. Failure to comply. "I've got it handled." Ruiz frowned. He looked at Marcus, calm, composed, not struggling. Then he looked at the crowd, who shook their heads and whispered that Marcus had done nothing. Something didn't add up. Did he resist? Ruiz asked. No, Daniels admitted grudgingly. But he was smart-mouthing, thought he could talk his way out. Ruiz's stomach twisted. This didn't look like an arrest. It looked like harassment. But Daniels was his senior, and speaking against him in front of a crowd could cost him dearly. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Marcus met Ruiz's eyes. For a brief second, their gazes locked, and Marcus's steady calm sent a message. "You know this isn't right." Ruiz swallowed hard and looked away, but the seed of doubt was planted. Daniels yanked the door open and shoved Marcus inside, ignoring the cameras flashing around him. The crowd shouted now, their voices louder than before. He didn't do anything. That's police abuse. You can't just arrest someone because you feel like it. Inside the car, Marcus sat still, the cuffs tight around his wrists. His reflection in the window looked back at him, calm, collected, patient. He had been in worse situations before, far worse. This was not the first time someone had underestimated him. And as the patrol car door slammed shut, Marcus knew something with absolute certainty. Officer Daniels was about to face the biggest shock of his life. Because in just a short while, Daniels would discover the truth, that the man he mocked, the man he called a thug, the man he handcuffed for loitering, was an FBI agent. And when that badge was revealed, no excuse in the world would be enough to save him. But Marcus wasn't rushing. The humiliation, the cameras, the witnesses, all of it was building to a moment that Daniels would never forget. A moment where arrogance met justice, and the park, once silent, was now buzzing with voices, anger, and disbelief. People were already calling out to lawyers, news outlets, anyone who would listen. They knew they had witnessed something unjust, and Marcus knew this was no longer just about him. This was about every time a man like Daniels thought he could get away with abuse. The car engine rumbled, but the tension in the park lingered. For Daniels, this was just another day of keeping order. For Marcus, it was the start of exposing the truth. And for the crowd, it was the moment they realized they were part of something much bigger than an arrest. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The squad car rolled slowly away from the park, its tires crunching against the pavement. From inside, Marcus could still hear the raised voices of the crowd, their shouts echoing in the distance. People weren't going to let this slide. He knew that much. Videos were already spreading, texts and calls were being made, and the incident that had started as one officer's arrogance was now spiraling into something larger. Marcus sat upright in the back seat, his wrists bound behind him. The position was uncomfortable, but he held himself with an air of quiet defiance. He wasn't going to let Daniels see discomfort, because Daniels thrived on it. To him, showing pain meant submission. And Marcus refused to give him that satisfaction. From the driver's seat, Daniels glanced into the rearview mirror, his eyes cold and smug. "You're quiet now, huh?" he muttered. "That mouth of yours won't save you where you're going." Marcus tilted his head slightly, his calmness unnerving. "Where I'm going?" he asked. "You have no idea where I belong." The words were subtle, almost casual, but they hit Daniels like a challenge. He clenched the wheel tighter. "I know exactly where you belong. Jail. Maybe after a night in a cell, you'll remember who's in charge here." Ruiz, in the passenger seat, shifted uncomfortably. He had been silent since leaving the park, his mind torn between loyalty to his fellow officer and the growing knot in his gut. Nothing about this felt right. The man in the back seat hadn't resisted, hadn't raised his voice, hadn't done a single thing to justify being arrested. And yet Daniels was treating him like a hardened criminal. Ruiz knew this wasn't policing. This was ego. Marcus leaned back against the seat, his eyes steady. "Tell me, officer," he said slowly, "what exactly do you plan to charge me with?" Daniels smirked. Failure to comply. Resisting an officer. Loitering. "Hell, I'll figure it out once we get there." "Doesn't matter. I can make it stick." Ruiz's jaw tightened. "Daniels," he said cautiously, "none of that's going to hold up. You know that." Daniels shot him a glare. "Stay out of it. I've been doing this longer than you." He thought he was smarter than me. Now he'll learn the hard way. Marcus chuckled softly, the sound low but sharp enough to sting Daniels's pride. "You think you hold all the cards," he said, "but you don't know who you're dealing with." Daniels slammed a hand against the steering wheel. "You think your attitude scares me? You're nobody. Just another thug who doesn't know his place." The words hung heavy in the air, thick with venom. Ruiz's stomach turned. He opened his mouth to speak, but stopped when Marcus leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on Daniels through the partition. His voice was calm, deliberate, like a teacher correcting a student. "You made a mistake the second you assumed my worth by the color of my skin. And you made an even bigger mistake putting cuffs on me, without cause. Because when we get to that station, the truth is going to end your career." Daniels barked out a laugh. "End my career? Please. Who's going to believe you? A nobody I found loitering in the park." Marcus didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned back in his seat and let the silence linger. His words were calculated, meant to gnaw at Daniels's arrogance. And they were working. Daniels gripped the wheel tighter, his face red with irritation, his need to control the situation growing desperate. Finally, Ruiz spoke, his voice tense. "Daniels, maybe you should just—" But before he could finish, Marcus shifted his shoulders, subtly pulling his cuffed hands forward. Daniels snapped his head around. "What are you doing?" Marcus smiled, faintly. "Just adjusting. Don't worry. I'm not resisting." And then, slowly, deliberately, Marcus revealed the item he had been carrying in his pocket before the cuffs went on. Daniels froze, his eyes widening. It was a badge. Not a police badge, an FBI badge. The gold and blue glinted under the dim light of the squad car, unmistakable, undeniable. Ruiz's jaw dropped. Daniels' face drained of color, the blood rushing from his cheeks as reality hit him like a freight train. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Marcus's voice was calm, controlled, and final. "My name is Special Agent Marcus Johnson, Federal Bureau of Investigation, and you, Officer Daniels, just unlawfully arrested a federal agent while verbally harassing him in front of dozens of witnesses, with cameras rolling." The silence that followed was deafening. The hum of the engine, the distant sound of traffic, the faint creak of leather as Ruiz shifted in his seat, all of it felt amplified against the crushing weight of Marcus's words. Daniels' hands shook on the wheel. He tried to form words, to stammer some excuse, but nothing came out. His arrogance had evaporated, leaving only panic in its place. Ruiz, wide-eyed, turned to Marcus. "Is that real?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus met his gaze. "As real as the consequences that are coming." Daniels finally found his voice, though it cracked with fear. This doesn't mean anything. You can't just—" Marcus cut him off, his tone firm. "It means everything. You targeted me for nothing more than sitting in a park. You harassed me, humiliated me, and arrested me without cause. And you did it in front of a crowd of witnesses who captured every second on video. Your words, your actions, they're all recorded. You're finished." Ruiz swallowed hard, his hands trembling. He had joined the force to serve, to protect. This wasn't what he signed up for. And now, sitting beside Daniels, he realized just how deep the damage could go. Daniels stammered, his voice cracking. I didn't know." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes like steel. "That's the problem. You didn't care to know. To you, I was guilty the moment you saw me. And now, you'll have to answer for it." The weight of those words hung heavy in the car. Ruiz stared at the badge, his mind racing. Daniels' chest rose and fell rapidly, panic etched across his face. And Marcus sat back, calm and composed, knowing the truth had finally surfaced. For Daniels, this was the beginning of the end. For Marcus, it was justice in motion. And for Ruiz, it was the moment he realized he had a choice to make: stay silent and complicit, or speak up and do what was right. The car continued toward the station, but the atmosphere inside had changed completely. Daniels was no longer in control. Marcus was. And he wasn't finished yet. By the time the patrol car pulled into the station lot, Daniels was sweating through his uniform. His once rigid posture had slumped, and his face carried the haunted look of a man realizing his empire of arrogance was about to collapse. Ruiz sat beside him, silent but visibly shaken, his eyes flicking from Marcus's badge to Daniels' trembling hands. Marcus stepped out of the back seat when the door opened, his wrists still cuffed behind him. He didn't struggle, didn't raise his voice. He simply walked with a calm dignity that contrasted Daniels' nervous, jerky movements. The few officers standing near the entrance paused, their conversations breaking off as they noticed the tension between the three men. Inside, Daniels tried to hurry Marcus past the front desk, but Marcus stopped abruptly, forcing Daniels to stumble slightly. With deliberate patience, Marcus turned toward the duty sergeant at the desk and spoke clearly. My name is Special Agent Marcus Johnson, Federal Bureau of Investigation, he said, his voice carrying across the station. I was unlawfully detained and arrested by this officer while sitting in a public park doing nothing more than reading a book. The room froze. The duty sergeant blinked, confused, before looking at Daniels. What is he talking about? Daniels stammered, his words tumbling over each other. He didn't comply. He refused to show ID. He was loitering. Marcus's voice cut clean through the excuses. I identified myself when asked. I wasn't loitering, and refusing to provide ID without probable cause is not a crime. This officer targeted me because of the color of my skin. Whispers spread quickly through the station. Ruiz finally spoke, his voice hesitant but steady. Sergeant, I was there. He wasn't doing anything wrong. The crowd was recording. It's all on video. Daniels spun toward him, betrayal etched in his eyes. Ruiz, what are you? But Ruiz didn't falter. He looked at the sergeant, then back at Marcus. He told the truth. He showed us his badge in the car. He's FBI. The sergeant's face hardened. He stepped out from behind the desk. His voice clipped. Take those cuffs off him. Now, Daniels hesitated, but the sergeant's glare brooked no argument. With trembling hands, Daniels fumbled with the key and unlocked the cuffs. Marcus rubbed his wrists lightly, the faint red marks a visible reminder of the humiliation he had endured. He met the sergeant's eyes and gave a small nod of thanks. But he wasn't finished. Sergeant, Marcus said, I want this documented. Every word, every action. I want the footage from the body cams pulled immediately, and I want it noted that witnesses recorded the entire incident. I will also be contacting my field office. The sergeant nodded quickly. Of course, Agent Johnson. We'll cooperate fully. Danielle's face turned ghostly pale. It's not. He's twisting this. He was disrespectful. Marcus's calm voice cut through again. Respect is earned, officer, not demanded through abuse. You treated me like a criminal because of the color of my skin. You ignored my rights, you ignored the law, and you thought your badge protected you from consequences. It doesn't. The station fell silent. No one moved. Daniels stood exposed, stripped of his authority by his own arrogance. Ruiz lowered his head, unable to meet his partner's eyes. Then, as if on cue, the sound of buzzing phones filled the room. Officers glanced at their screens, their expressions shifting as they read incoming messages. The videos from the park had already gone viral. Clips of Daniels handcuffing Marcus, of his words dripping with racism, were spreading like wildfire across social media. News outlets were already picking it up, headlines forming in real time. Officer arrests black man for sitting in park. Turns out he's FBI agent. Daniels' breathing grew shallow. His entire career, his reputation, was unraveling before his eyes. The sergeant turned to him, his voice ice. Go to my office. Now, Daniels tried to protest, but his words died on his lips. Shoulders slumped. He shuffled toward the office. His once proud swagger reduced to a defeated shuffle. Marcus turned to Ruiz, who still looked shaken. You have a choice, Marcus said quietly. You can stay silent and be part of the problem, or you can speak the truth. Which side of history do you want to stand on? Ruiz swallowed hard, his eyes filled with conflict. But deep down, he knew the answer. He gave a small nod. I'll tell the truth. Marcus studied him for a moment, then offered a faint smile. Good. Then maybe some good can come of this. Within an hour, representatives from the FBI field office arrived. Marcus's superiors didn't just walk in quietly. They entered with authority, their presence shifting the entire atmosphere of the station. The special agent in charge shook Marcus's hand firmly, then turned a cold glare on the officers present. "Agent Johnson is one of ours," the supervisor said loudly, "and he deserves an apology for the humiliation he suffered here today. We'll be conducting a full investigation, and I can assure you this will not be swept under the rug." Daniels, now seated in the sergeant's office, could hear every word. His head dropped into his hands. His arrogance, his prejudice, had led him here, and there was no way out. The station buzzed with tension. Officers who had once turned a blind eye to Daniels' behavior now whispered about the end of his career. Ruiz gave his statement, detailing exactly what had happened. Witnesses from the park called in, confirming Marcus's account. The videos circulating online painted an unshakable picture of the truth. For Marcus, the victory wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about showing that men like Daniels couldn't operate unchecked, hiding behind a badge while trampling on the rights of others. His calm patience had paid off, not just for himself, but for every person who had ever been judged unfairly. That night, as Marcus sat in his apartment, he reflected on the events of the day. He had gone to the park seeking peace, and instead, he had become the center of a storm. But maybe, he thought, that was exactly what needed to happen. Change never came quietly. It came when arrogance met accountability. And Daniels? He sat alone, his phone buzzing relentlessly with calls he didn't answer. His name was already trending for all the wrong reasons. His badge, once his shield, now felt like a weight dragging him down. The world he thought he controlled had turned on him in the span of a single afternoon. And the man he tried to humiliate, he had stood taller than ever. The following morning, the city awoke to headlines plastered across every news outlet and social media feed. The videos from the park had spread far beyond the city limits, drawing national attention. Commentators on television debated the incident, while community leaders condemned the officers' actions. Hashtags calling for accountability trended worldwide, and Marcus's calm composure in the face of humiliation became a symbol of resilience. For Marcus, the whirlwind of attention wasn't something he sought. He had never wanted the spotlight. His job in the FBI required precision, discretion, and a life largely out of public view. Yet here he was, his name now synonymous with justice. Though he hadn't chosen the moment, he understood its importance. It wasn't about him alone. It was about every man, woman, and child who had endured similar treatment without the platform to fight back. At the precinct, the fallout was immediate. Officer Daniels was suspended without pay pending an investigation, but everyone knew suspension was just a formality. His career was effectively over. The videos, the eyewitnesses, and Marcus's own badge had left no room for excuses. The department faced an avalanche of criticism, accused of fostering a culture where officers like Daniels felt untouchable. Ruiz, meanwhile, was hailed as one of the few voices of conscience in the incident. His statements supporting Marcus had given credibility to the truth. Though nervous about backlash within the department, he found himself approached by colleagues quietly thanking him for speaking out. It wasn't easy, but Ruiz knew he had made the right choice. For the first time in his career, he felt he had lived up to the oath he swore. Marcus's FBI supervisors met with city officials later that day. Behind closed doors, conversations were tense. The mayor promised reform, pledging to review police training and oversight. Civil rights groups demanded action, insisting that Daniels wasn't an isolated case, but a symptom of a deeper problem. And in the middle of it all, Marcus remained calm, measured, and determined. He wasn't interested in revenge. He wanted change. That evening, Marcus was invited to speak at a community gathering organized in the wake of the incident. At first, he hesitated. He was an agent, not an activist. But when he saw the crowd assembled, a sea of faces from every background, holding candles, signs, and each other's hands, he knew his voice mattered. Standing before them, Marcus took a deep breath and spoke with the same steady calm he had shown in the park. "I didn't plan to become a story yesterday," he began, his voice carrying through the hushed crowd. "I went to the park for peace. Instead, I was reminded of something we all know too well, that the color of our skin can make us a target no matter where we are or what we're doing. But I want you to know I didn't stay calm for myself. I stayed calm because I knew the truth would speak louder than anger. And the truth is this: no badge, no uniform gives anyone the right to treat another human being as less." Applause erupted, but Marcus held up his hand, his eyes steady. This isn't just about one officer. This is about a system that allows prejudice to hide behind authority. But yesterday also showed something else: the power of people who refused to stay silent. The crowd that recorded, the witnesses who spoke, the voices that rose up. Together, they made sure the truth couldn't be buried. And that's what gives me hope. The crowd cheered louder, some with tears streaming down their faces. Marcus continued, his tone softening. "We all deserve dignity. We all deserve respect. And when that dignity is stripped away, we must stand together, not just for ourselves, but for each other. I was targeted yesterday not as an agent, but as a Black man. And I want every person watching to know, your worth is not defined by how others see you. It's defined by how you carry yourself, how you fight for what's right, and how you lift others when they're being pushed down." The applause this time was thunderous. People stood, clapping, cheering, chanting his name. Marcus felt the weight of the moment settle over him. Not a burden, but a responsibility. He hadn't asked for it, but he wouldn't turn away from it either. Meanwhile, Daniel sat alone in his home, blinds drawn, his phone buzzing relentlessly with messages he ignored. His face was splashed across every screen in the country, not as a respected officer, but as a symbol of abuse and arrogance. The power he once wielded so carelessly had vanished overnight. His career was gone, his reputation destroyed, and his name forever tied to the worst decision he had ever made. But for Marcus, the story wasn't about Daniel's downfall. It was about the lesson, a reminder that dignity, patience, and truth could pierce even the deepest arrogance, and that no matter how high the abuse of power reached, there would always be those willing to stand against it. In the days that followed, Marcus returned to his work with the FBI, his life quieter once more. But he carried the moment with him, a reminder of why his work mattered. He had faced humiliation with calm, and in doing so, he had turned one officer's prejudice into a powerful lesson for the world. And though the park was quiet again, its fountain bubbling as if nothing had ever happened, the echoes of that day lingered. For everyone who had been there, for everyone who had watched, and for Marcus himself, the message was clear. Justice isn't just found in courts or laws. Sometimes it's found in the calm strength of standing tall when others try to tear you down. And sometimes it's found in the shock on a racist cop's face when he learns the truth that the man he thought was powerless was powerful beyond measure.